Imagine waking up in your home one morning to see that all of the plants around you, from the trees in your backyard to the flowers in your garden to the shrubs lining the streets, have mysteriously vanished. It seems like just a fantasy or maybe a nightmare. But what if this actually happened? What would happen if all the plants in the world suddenly disappeared overnight? Well, first, there would be widespread confusion and panic. People would start sharing videos and pictures on social media, trying to figure out what had happened. Some might even think it's the beginning of the end times, or some kind of divine retribution for humanity's mistreatment of the environment. After the initial shock wore off, people would begin to realize the gravity of the situation. The loss of plants would have a devastating impact on our food supply. After all, most of the food we eat comes from plants, whether directly as fruits, vegetables, and grains, or indirectly as animal products like meat, eggs, and dairy. Without plants, animals would quickly run out of food and starve. Humans would only have the food stored in our pantries and freezers to sustain us, and that would only last a few months. The sudden disappearance of all plants would also have a profound impact on our economy. Agriculture is one of the largest industries in the world and employs millions of people. Without plants, there would be no crops to harvest, no livestock to raise, and no agricultural products to process or distribute. This would lead to widespread unemployment and economic chaos. But these are just the short-term effects. In the long term, the consequences would be even more dire. The loss of plants would have a devastating impact on the environment. Plants play a vital role in the ecosystem by producing oxygen and removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They also help regulate the climate and prevent soil erosion. Without plants, the environment would quickly descend into chaos. As the oxygen levels dropped and the carbon dioxide levels rose, humans and animals alike would struggle to breathe. The climate would become unstable, with extreme weather events becoming more frequent. And the soil would become loose and vulnerable to wind and water erosion, leading to massive dust storms and floods. To make matters worse, the loss of plants would also have a devastating impact on wildlife. Many animals rely on plants for food and shelter. Without plants, these animals would starve or be killed by predators. This would lead to a mass extinction event, wiping out countless species and destabilizing the entire ecosystem. The consequences of losing all plants would be so catastrophic that it's hard to imagine how life could continue in such an environment. Entire industries would collapse, economies would crumble, and ecosystems would be thrown into chaos. The human race would face starvation, and the environment would become a shadow of its former self. Even though this scenario is highly unlikely to occur, it serves as a reminder of just how important plants are to our survival. From the air we breathe to the food we eat, plants play a vital role in our lives. We must do everything we can to protect them and ensure that they continue to thrive for generations to come. But what about insects? What would happen if all the plants suddenly disappeared and took away the food source for insects? How would this affect our lives? Would the insect apocalypse become a reality? Let's find out. Insects are essential for maintaining a healthy ecosystem. They pollinate crops, decompose organic matter, and provide food for other animals. Without insects, our planet would be in serious trouble. Their disappearance would have cascading effects on the environment and on our lives. If all the plants disappeared and took away their food source, many insects would indeed die off. This would likely be especially true for those insects that specialize in feeding on a single type of plant. For example, the monarch butterfly, which lays its eggs on milkweed and feeds exclusively on the plant's sap. Without milkweed, monarch butterflies would not have enough food to survive, and their population would likely crash. However, not all insects would be affected equally. Some insects, such as cockroaches and ants, are generalists and can feed on a variety of plant materials. These insects would likely be able to survive, at least in the short term. But even they would eventually run out of food as plants decompose and become unavailable. The loss of insects would have a significant impact on agriculture. Many crops rely on insects for pollination, including fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. Without insects to pollinate these crops, farmers would have to rely on other methods, such as hand pollination or the use of artificial pollinators. This would likely lead to a decrease in crop yields and an increase in food prices. Insects also play an important role in the decomposition of organic matter. They break down dead plants and animals and recycle the nutrients back into the ecosystem. Without insects, organic matter would accumulate and the ecosystem would be thrown into chaos. But perhaps the most immediate impact of an insect apocalypse would be felt by the animals that rely on them for food. Birds, reptiles, amphibians, and mammals that eat insects would be forced to find new food sources or starve. This could lead to another mass extinction event, wiping out countless species and destabilizing the entire ecosystem. So what would an insect apocalypse look like? Well, it would likely start with the mass extinction of specialist insects that rely on a single type of plant for food. As these insects disappear, their predators would be forced to find new food sources or starve. This would lead to a ripple effect throughout the ecosystem, causing the collapse of entire populations and the destabilization of the food chain. As more and more insects disappear, the impact on agriculture would become more and more pronounced. Farmers would struggle to pollinate their crops, leading to lower yields and higher prices. The decomposition of organic matter would slow down, leading to the accumulation of dead plants and animals. In the long term, the impact on the environment would be catastrophic. Without insects to pollinate crops, many plants would die off, leading to a loss of habitat and food sources for animals. The entire ecosystem would be thrown into chaos. It's worth noting that some insects, such as cockroaches and ants, would likely be able to survive, at least in the short term. However, they would eventually run out of food as plants decompose and become unavailable. Overall, the loss of insects would have a devastating impact on our planet and on our lives. From the food we eat to the air we breathe, insects play an important role in maintaining a healthy ecosystem. We must do everything we can to protect them and ensure that they continue to thrive for generations to come. But what about diseases? What if all the plants disappeared and took away the homes and habitats for animals that carry diseases? How would this affect us? Would this bring an end to the global pandemic? Let's find out. If all the plants disappeared, many animals that carry diseases would lose their habitat and food sources, leading to a decline in the spread of those diseases. For example, Lyme disease is transmitted to humans through the bite of infected ticks. Ticks live in wooded areas and leaf litter, which would disappear when all the plants vanish. This could lead to a decrease in tick populations and subsequently a decrease in Lyme disease cases. Similarly, many tropical diseases such as malaria and yellow fever are transmitted by mosquitoes that breed in standing water. Without plants to provide shade and cover, there would be fewer places for mosquitoes to lay their eggs and raise their young. This could lead to a decline in mosquito populations and a decrease in the spread of mosquito-borne diseases. However, it's important to note that some diseases are not dependent on plants for their life cycle. For example, tuberculosis and COVID-19 are spread through the air and do not require plants for transmission. Even if all the plants disappeared, these diseases would still be able to spread. In fact, the disappearance of plants could potentially lead to the emergence of new diseases. For example, as animals are forced to migrate in search of food and water, they may come into contact with each other and with humans more frequently. This could lead to the spread of animal diseases to humans, such as the recent COVID-19 pandemic. Moreover, the loss of plants would have a major impact on the environment, leading to changes in climate and weather patterns that could affect the spread of diseases. For example, without plants to absorb carbon dioxide, the greenhouse effect would become more pronounced, leading to higher temperatures and changes in precipitation. These changes could create new habitats for disease-carrying animals and plants, and could also weaken the immune systems of humans and other animals, making them more susceptible to diseases. Ultimately, the impact of the disappearance of all plants on the spread of diseases would be complex and far-reaching. While some diseases would likely decrease due to the loss of habitat for disease vectors, such as ticks and mosquitoes, other diseases would continue to spread as normal, or even increase due to changes in climate-animal migration and the emergence of new diseases. As we have seen, plants play a vital role in our lives, from providing us with food and oxygen to regulating the climate and preventing soil erosion. But they also provide homes and food for animals, including those that carry diseases. The disappearance of plants would have a devastating impact on our environment and on our lives. It's important to remember that we are all interconnected and that the loss of one species can have ripple effects throughout the entire ecosystem. While it's highly unlikely that all the plants in the world would suddenly disappear, it is always possible that a disease or a natural disaster could wipe out a significant portion of the plant kingdom. That's why it's important to protect plants and to study them so that we can better understand the vital role they play in our lives. By doing so, we can ensure that plants continue to thrive for generations to come, and that we can enjoy the benefits they provide, including the beauty and wonder that they bring to our lives.